Hey guys, welcome to United Indians e-learning platform. I am Ruksa Tak and I'm teaching you Indian art and culture in very simple and lucid manner. So we have already discussed post-Mauryan architecture. Okay, Harappan architecture we have discussed the Mauryan architecture. We have already discussed the post-Mauryan architecture also. Now after that we have to continue the Gupta architecture. So let's begin with it. So some details about Gupta architecture. So Gupta era is also called as the golden period of Indian architecture. Okay, so temple architecture as well as the Buddhist and Jain art and architecture reached its peak during Gupta age. Now, do not get yourself confused that Gupta age is the age of Hindu gods and all that, and hence Buddhist and Jain art or architecture have declined in this period. No, it is not like that. Temple architecture also reached its climax during Gupta period, as well as Buddhist and Jain art and architecture also reached its peak, its climax during Gupta age. That is, both temple architecture and Buddhist and Jain architecture flourished in Gupta age. Okay. Now, as I told you, in the Gupta age, worship of Hindu gods increased. So the main three principal deities or gods that were worshipped in Gupta age were Vishnu, Shiv and Shakti. So Vishnu was worshipped in northern and central part of India. Shiv was worshipped in southern part of India. Okay, and Shakti was worshipped in the eastern part as well as the Malabar coast or southwest part of India. Malabar coast as in you can say the Kerala. Okay, so we have three principal deities, Vishnu, Shiv and Shakti, that were worshipped in the Gupta age. And the temple architecture is based on the worship of these three principal deities. Okay, so first of all, let's see, beginning with the architecture of Gupta age, we will be seeing the Ajanta caves, various caves under Gupta age. First of it is Ajanta caves, which was built in 200 BC to 650 AD. So these are the rock cut caves which lies in the Sahyadri ranges, okay, in Aurangabad, Maharashtra. All right, Sahyadri ranges में आता है Ajanta caves and it is near Waghora river, Aurangabad, Maharashtra. So this location you need to remember. Okay, it would be easier for you if you locate it on the atlas or your map. Fine, then it will be very easy for you to remember such thing that here is the place where Ajanta caves lie. Okay, it is in the Sahyadri range near Aurangabad in Maharashtra and it lies on the Waghora river and it is a rock cut cave. Okay, so in Ajanta cave you will find total of 29 caves. Out of these 29 caves we have 25 vihars, that is the residential place of the monks. Okay, and 4 chaityas. Okay, chaitya are the prayer halls. Okay, remember these terms. I told you earlier as well. Vihars are the residential place of the monks and chaitya are the prayer halls of the monks. So out of the 29 caves in Ajanta, we have 25 vihars and 4 chaitya. Now, out of these 29 caves, 5 caves have been developed during the Hinayana phase. Okay, Hinayana, Mahayana, these are the two broad sects of Buddhism. So 5 of these caves are developed during Hinayana phase and 24 are developed during Mahayana phase. Now Hinayana is also called the lesser vehicle and Mahayana is also called the greater vehicle. Okay. Now these caves are inscribed by Buddhist monks under patronage of Vakataka king, especially Hari Sena. Point to remember under which king the Ajanta caves were inscribed. Okay, so the Ajanta caves were inscribed under the patronage of Vakataka kings and especially under the patronage of Hari Sena. Now, for these inscriptions, okay, inscriptions on the walls of caves, a special technique called fresco painting technique was used. Now, what is this fresco painting technique? Now, fresco painting technique is a technique of mural painting. Okay, mural painting which is done on the walls, on the rocks. Okay, which is executed upon freshly laid lime plaster. Okay, fresh plaster is applied on the wall first. Now the fresh plaster is still quite soft. You can engrave upon it beautiful designs. Okay, you can engrave upon it various paintings of your choice. So first the plaster is set on the wall, and on the fresh plaster, when it is still soft, the painting is done, and then the plaster is set. Okay, it dries out and the plaster is set on the wall, and after that the painting becomes an integral part of the wall. So this is called fresco painting. Okay, fresco painting में क्या होता है, सबसे पहले plaster लगाया जाता है wall पे. When the plaster is still wet and soft, then painting is done. Okay, engraving is done on the plaster. Then the plaster is set on the wall as a part of the wall, and along with it, the painting also becomes an integral part of the wall. Okay. One important feature of the fresco painting as well as Ajanta caves is that the outlines of the paintings are made in red color, and there is absence of blue color. Okay, these two are important point to remember in concern with the Ajanta caves. First is the outline of the paintings are done in red color, and secondly there is absolute absence of blue color in Ajanta caves paintings. Okay, these paintings are generally themed around Buddhism. Generally, they are themed around Buddhism. For example, in Cave 26, there is a painting of Mahaparinirvana of Buddha. Okay, and then in cave number 19, we have the Naga king and his consort. Okay, then reference of Ajanta caves are also found in travel accounts of Fa Yan and Zhuzang. Okay, Zhuzang, who came in the time of Harshvardhan. And Fa Yan visited India during the time of Chandragupta II, also called as Vikramaditya. Okay, so in the accounts of travel accounts of these two foreign travelers, also reference of Ajanta caves is there. Now the picture in the right side, you see the dying princess. It is a great example of fresco painting. Okay, fresco painting which we have seen over here, the plaster painting. This is a fresco painting, the dying princess. Okay. Then coming on to the Ellora caves. The Ellora caves were carved out between 5th and 11th centuries AD. Now, it is also located in Maharashtra, okay, 100 kilometers away from Ajanta caves. It is also there in Sahyadri ranges. Now, what we have seen in Ajanta caves, that it is majorly a Buddhist cave. Okay, you will find a lot of Buddhist work in Ajanta caves, and rarely any other religion you will find over here. But in Ellora caves, we find Buddhist, Hindus and Jain caves. Okay, 17 of it are Brahmanical, that is Hindu caves, 12 are Buddhist cave, and 5 are Jain caves. That is in total you have 34 caves in Ellora. Okay, so cave 1 to 12 are Buddhist caves, cave 13 to 29 are Hindu caves, and cave 30 to 34 are the Jain caves, and that too of the Digambara set. Okay, not of the Shvetambara set. Okay, these two are the sects of Jainism, Digambaras and Shvetambaras. Okay, so the difference that you need to remember between Ellora and Ajanta caves is that Ajanta is majorly Buddhist caves, and Ellora caves are secular caves, that they have Buddhist caves, Hindu caves as well as Jain caves. Okay. Now some of the prominent caves in Ellora are, now these are very important. ये exam में पूछा जाता है. Okay, these caves are asked in exam, like Vishwakarma cave, Ravan ki Khai, the Shavtar temple, Kailash temple. This question has already been asked in prelims. Okay, then you have Rameshwar temple, Dhumar Lena, Indra Sabha, Jagannath Sabha. So all these caves are, or temples are part of Ellora caves. Okay, so cave number 10 is a Buddhist Chaitya cave known as the Vishwakarma cave. So Vishwakarma cave is a Chaitya. It is a Buddhist Chaitya. Okay, so Buddha is seated in a Vyakhyana mudra here, and Bodhi tree is carved at his back. Then you have cave number 14, of which theme is Ravan ki Khai. Okay, Ravan ki Khai is the theme of cave number 14 in Ellora. तो आपको बस इतना याद रखना है, रावण की खाई इज रिलेटेड टू एलोरा केव्स, विश्वकर्मा केव इज देयर इन एलोरा केव, दशावतार कैलाश टेम्पल, और दीज थिंग्स आर देयर इन एलोरा. So अगर आपको पूछ लिया जाता है if UPSC asks you that Dashavatar temple is a part of Ajanta cave, then it will be wrong, because you know that Ajanta cave is majorly a Buddhist cave and you cannot find Dashavatar temple in Ajanta, but yes, in Ellora you can. So here, like this, you can eliminate your options. Okay, so this way you can remember. Then in cave number 16, you have Kailash temple, which is dedicated to Lord Shiv. Okay, and who developed this Kailash temple? It were the Rashtrakutas. Okay, Rashtrakuta King Krishna I has developed this temple, Kailash temple, which is dedicated to Lord Shiva. Then again in cave 16 itself, you have a sculpture which is there on the wall of Kailash temple, which depicts Ravan, who is shaking Mount Kailash. Okay, and it is considered one of the masterpieces of Indian culture. So cave number 16 is totally devoted to Kailash temple. Okay, and the Mount Kailash episode, that is the Ravan is shaking Mount Kailasha. There is a sculpture of this showing into the cave number 16. Okay, then you have the Dhumar Lena in cave 29. You have the Rameshwar temple in cave 21. Then two famous Jain caves are also there, Indra Sabha in cave 32 and Jagannath Sabha in cave 33. So you need to memorize these things. Okay. Then you have the Bagh Caves and Junagadh Caves. So Bagh Caves are located on the bank of the Bagh River in Madhya Pradesh, and it is a group of 9 Buddhist caves developed around 6th century AD. Now, what you need to remember over here in the caves is that which one are the Hindu caves, which one are the Jain caves or Buddhist caves. Okay, so the Bagh Caves are the Buddhist caves, and they are architecturally very similar to the Ajanta caves. Coming on to the Junagadh caves. Now, Junagadh is there in Gujarat. Okay, Bagh caves were in MP. So they are not actually caves here, but 3 different sites can be found. Okay, continuous caves you cannot found, but though you have various sites, and 3 main sites are there, which are Khapra Kodia, Baba Pyare, and Uparkot. Okay, these 3 sites are there wherein you can find signs of caves. And a unique feature of the Junagadh cave is the presence of a 30 to 50 feet high citadel. Citadel we have seen in the Harappan architecture. That what is citadel? Okay, citadel is a uprooted like a moon. Okay, a place at the upheaval. Okay, lower city we have seen, upper city we have seen in the Harappan architecture. The upper city was known as the citadel. Okay, which is like a hill. So this is called a citadel on something high, like on a platform. Okay, made on a platform or on a rock or on a mountain or a hill, small hill. Okay, so 30 to 50 feet high citadel was seen at this place in Junagadh, which is called the Upper Court. Okay, in front of the prayer hall. So these 3 sites are there in Junagadh caves. Fine. Then you have the Nasik caves again in Maharashtra. It is a group of 24 Buddhist caves, which is also known as Pandav Leni. Important. Okay, very important. आपको नासिक caves की जगह वो directly Pandav Leni term डाल देंगे. Okay, they will give you just the term Pandav Leni. That where is Pandav Leni? So it is in Maharashtra. It was built in 1st century AD, and majorly it is built by Hinayana Buddhist monks. Okay. Now, Hinayana ke kya features is? Majorly it is Hinayana, but though we found some features of Mahayana Buddhism as well in it. Okay. So Hinayana features kya hai isme? His presence is indicated through the use of motifs and symbols like throne and footprints. Okay, if you have learned about Buddhism, you must have learned about the features of Hinayana and Mahayana. That what is the difference between Hinayana and Mahayana sect of Buddhism? Okay, Hinayana Buddhism does not believe in idolatry, idolism. Okay, it is praying before the idol of Buddha, Gautam Buddha. Okay, they don't believe in it. They just worship in front of motifs or symbols of Buddhism. Okay, like his throne or his footprints or the tree under which he attained enlightenment, etc. But in Mahayana Buddhism, the idols of Buddha are worshipped. Okay, they believe in idolatry. So this is the major difference between Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, so how do we know that Nasik caves have Hinayana features like throne and footprints of Buddha are there. Hence, it indicates that the Hinayana Buddhists used to worship these motifs and symbols of Buddha. Okay, how do we know Nasik caves have Mahayana features? Of course, through the idols of Buddha. Okay, the idols of Buddha were carved inside the caves. Okay, they were carved in the cave walls, and hence they were worshipped like this. Idolatry was there. Fine. Then what we see in Nasir caves is an excellent system of water management that is indicated through presence of water tanks carved out of solid rocks. Okay, water tanks were carved in the rocks inside the caves, and hence we can see that there was an excellent system of water management. That is, when the monks used to live there, of course they um, wanted to have water supply, like for their daily needs, for drinking, for bathing, etc. Okay, so there was a system of water management in the Nasik caves as well. All right, so Nasik caves are also known as Pandavleni. They are majorly Hinayana, but also Mahayana features are seen in the caves. Okay, I have already told you Hinayana features or Mahayana features में क्या difference होता है. Hinayana does not believe in idolatry, though Mahayana believes in idolatry. And also in Nasik caves, we found an excellent system of water management. Okay, then you have Mandapeshwar caves. Now Mandapeshwar caves again in Maharashtra. It is in Borivali near Mumbai, and these are also known as Mont Perir caves. So if in exams you are asked about Mandapeshwar caves or the Mont Perir caves, it is one and the same things. And these caves are purely Brahminical cave in their earlier times, but later it was converted into a Christian cave. So Mandapeshwar caves have nothing to do with Buddhism or Jainism. It is a Brahminical cave which was later converted into a Christian cave. That is, you can find church features in the caves. All right. Then is your Udaygiri caves. Now, these Udaygiri caves is not to be confused with the Udaygiri Khandagiri caves of Odisha that we have learned. Okay, Hathi Gumfa, Rani Gumfa, etc. Okay, if you remember, we have done these things earlier. Udaygiri Khandagiri caves of Odisha, Hathi Gumfa inscription we have done of Kharavela. Do you remember? Okay, so these Udaygiri caves of Madhya Pradesh, Vidisha are different from that one. So this Udaygiri caves are created in early 5th century AD under the patronage of Chandragupta II. Okay, Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty, Vikramaditya. Fa Yan. Okay, try to link such things, what you have remembered earlier in the early slides. Okay, Fa Yan, we have seen that Fa Yan in his travel accounts have mentioned the Ajanta caves, and he had come at the time of Chandragupta II, who is also called as Vikramaditya of the Gupta dynasty. All right, now what do we find in Udaygiri caves? The sculpture of Varaha or boar incarnation of the Vishnu is found in the Udaygiri caves. Now, apart from Vishnu, Udaygiri caves also have some caves that are dedicated to Shiv, Narsimha, Narayan and Skanda. Narsimha क्या है? Half man and half lion. Narayana का है? Narayana is the resting Vishnu and also Skanda. Okay, so boar incarnation of Vishnu. Then some caves are dedicated to Shiv. Then some are dedicated to Narsimha, Narayan, etc. All right, but don't get yourself confused between these two caves called Udaygiri caves and Udaygiri Khandagiri caves. Clear? Next is stupas. Next under architecture of the Guptas is the stupas. Okay, so the Guptas saw a decline in the development of stupas. Very important point. Okay, the stupas reached its climax during the Mauryan Empire, especially during Ashoka. But in the Gupta age, the development of stupas got a setback. They saw a decline. Okay, so we have only some few examples of stupas during the Gupta age, and one of it is the Dhamek stupa, which is there at Sarnath near Varanasi. Okay, so it is a fine example of stupa developed during the Gupta age. Here in the picture, you can see the Dhamek stupa at Sarnath. Okay, so this is the example of the stupa architecture in the Gupta age. Fine. or majorly you can say the stupa development got a setback in the Gupta age. Now coming on to the Gupta sculptures. Okay, we are done with the Gupta architecture. Now we'll move on to Gupta sculpture. Now during the Gupta period, a new school of sculpture developed around Sarnath. Now this new school of sculpture which developed around Sarnath was characterized by use of cream colored sandstone and also the use of metal on a large scale. Okay, now these sculpture were lacking any form of nakedness. That is, they were fully dressed. There was no nakedness shown in sculptures of this school. Okay, they were very immaculately dressed, like in the picture you can see. Okay, no nakedness is shown. And the halo around the head of Buddha was intricately decorated. So the halo picture is not over here, but the halo, that is the circle around the head of the Buddha, which we have seen in the earlier slides. Okay, so the halo around the head of the Buddha is very intricately decorated in this school of sculpture, which developed in Gupta age. Now this picture which is shown is of Sultanganj Buddha. Okay, it is of Sultanganj Buddha, which was 7.5 feet high. Okay, it is 7.5 feet high. All right, clear? So now some extra dose about some copper plates or ancient inscriptions and edicts. All right. Now, these important ancient inscriptions and edicts are good for your prelims. Okay, prelims में काफी statements में all ऐसे questions पूछे जाते हैं. So it's good if you read and remember these inscriptions or edicts features. Fine. So let's start. First one is your Sohagura copper plate. Now this is the earliest known copper plate. This Sohagura copper plate is the earliest known copper plate. That is the oldest copper plate ever known in India. Okay, so it is consisting of Mauryan records, which mentions famine relief efforts that have been taken by the kings, the Mauryan kings at that time. Okay, then it also consists of pre-Ashoka Brahmi inscription. Now we know Ashoka have used Brahmi inscriptions in his edicts, pillar edicts, or rock inscriptions, etc. Right? But this copper plate was having Brahmi inscription before Ashoka. Okay, whenever we see Brahmi inscription, we remember Ashoka, that Ashoka has popularized the Brahmi script. But there are some examples wherein there is existence of pre-Ashoka Brahmi inscriptions as well, and Sohagura copper plate is one of them. Okay, then you have the Ashokan edicts between 269 BC to 232 BC. These Ashokan edicts represent the first tangible evidence of Buddhism. That is, Buddhism existed in those times, in the times of Ashoka, was first time evident in the Ashokan edicts. Okay, now his edicts are divided into three: pillar edicts, major rock edicts, and major rock inscriptions. Okay, your pillar edicts, major rock edicts, and major rock inscriptions. These are the three divisions of Ashokan edicts. Now, the main focus of these Ashokan edicts were on social and moral precepts rather than religious practices or philosophical dimension of Buddhism. Okay, Ashoka never meant to propagate any religion. Okay, be it Buddhism. He never wanted to propagate Buddhism or its religious philosophies through his edicts, but he wanted to spread the social and moral message of Buddhism. Okay, the message of Dhamma or Dharma, as you say. Now, in these inscriptions, Ashoka refers to himself as Devanam Piyadasi, that is, beloved servant of the god. Okay, Devanam Piyadasi. Dasi is servant. Okay, Dev is god. Okay, so many majorly in all his inscription he has been referred to as a Devanam Piyadasi. Okay, now themes kya hote the? These inscriptions had certain themes. So these themes were Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism, Okay, efforts to spread Buddhism, moral and religious precepts, social and animal welfare programs. Okay, that is how Ashoka converted to Buddhism, why he converted to Buddhism. Okay, what are the efforts of Ashoka to spread Buddhism? That is, he sent missionaries to various kings and queens and also outside of India as well, in Sri Lanka, etc. Okay, then what measures has he taken for social welfare and animal welfare? That is, he has banned the slaughter of animals, slaughter of cattle specifically for sacrificial purposes. All right, so all these were inscribed in his edicts. Then one is Prayag Prashishti. Okay, Ashokan edicts khatam ho gaya. It is ended over here. The new one is the Prayag Prashishti, which is also called Allahabad Pillar Inscription. Prashasti means in praise of someone. Okay, Prashasti means a praise of someone, and it is a eulogy. What is a eulogy? A eulogy is a piece of writing in praise of someone who has died. Okay, who has just died. So it is a tribute to that dead person, that you are writing something in praise of the person. Okay, now some important facts about the Prayag Prashishti or the Allahabad Pillar Inscription. Okay, one and the same thing. Prayag Prashishti bolo ya Allahabad Pillar Inscription bolo, एक ही बात है. Now Allahabad Prashishti जो है, originally it was engraved on Ashokan pillar, which was in Koshambi in Allahabad. Okay, it was in Koshambi in Allahabad. Okay, originally उसी पे engrave था वो, but afterwards it was removed to the Allahabad fort. उसके बाद उसको इलाहाबाद फोर्ट में रखा गया. इसमें 4 डिफरेंट इंस्क्रिप्शंस है. ओके, 4 डिफरेंट इंस्क्रिप्शंस आर देयर इन Allahabad pillar inscription or Prayag Prashishti, as you say. Fine, that means कि not one ruler, सिर्फ एक रूलर ने उसके ऊपर inscribe नहीं किया है या engrave नहीं किया है. There were many rulers who did that. So 4 different inscriptions are there on Prayag Prashishti. First one is the Ashokan inscription, which is there in Brahmi script. Next you will have the Queen's edict, okay, which is about the charitable deeds which was done by Ashoka's wife Kaurvaki. Okay, the first two inscriptions are related to Ashoka. First is of Ashoka himself and second one is of Ashoka's queen Kaurvaki. Okay, now third one is about Samudragupta. Okay, Samudragupta inscription, which was written by Harisena in Sanskrit language and Brahmi script. Now, what does the inscription mentions about Samudragupta? It mentions about the conquest of Samudragupta and boundaries of the Gupta Empire, that how much conquest Samudragupta have done and how many kingdoms he have brought under the Gupta Empire. Okay, so Samudragupta, his court poet Harisena, and Prayag Prashishti. So Prayag Prashishti is related to various rulers, not just Ashoka, not just Samudragupta. And lastly, the last inscription which is seen on the Prayag Prashishti is Jahangir's inscription, which is in the Persian language. Okay, so first two are the Ashokan inscription, third one is the Samudragupta, which is done by Harisena, and last one is the Jahangir's inscriptions. Fine. Next important ancient inscription is the Mehroli inscription, which is located in Qutub Minar complex in Delhi. Now, this was established by Chandragupta II as Vishnupada in honor of Lord Vishnu. Credits Chandragupta with conquest of the Vanga countries, and it also credits him for conquest of Vakatakas. Mehroli inscription, I told you, the Mehroli, the iron pillar. Okay, the iron pillar which has not rusted all these years. On that pillar, one name called Chandra is mentioned, and it is believed that that Chandra relates to Chandragupta II. Okay, so hence this is how the link is made between that Chandra and Chandragupta II, and it has been concluded that this Mehroli inscription belonged to Chandragupta II, and it established Chandragupta as Vishnupada. Okay, he used to follow Lord Vishnu, and has, in honor of Lord Vishnu as Vishnupada, he inscribed into this iron pillar. Okay, next important ancient inscription is the Kalsi inscription. So why it is important from exam perspective? Because it is the only place in North India where Ashoka had inscribed the set of 14 rock edicts in Prakrit language and Brahmi script. Okay, important point to remember. Now, what does it reflect or what does it mention? So it reflects Ashoka's human approach in his internal administration when he converted to Buddhism. Now, what is this human approach? That is non-violence, restriction of war, path of spirituality. Okay, when he converted to Buddhism, he gave up violence, he gave up war. Okay, and he adopted the path of spirituality. So all these things are inscribed into these 14 rock edicts in Kalsi inscription. Then you have Rumbindei pillar edicts in Lumbini. Rumbindei is the older name of Lumbini. Okay, so it mentions Ashoka's visit to Rumbindei or Lumbini in Nepal, and it is also in the Brahmi script. Next important ancient inscription is the Maski inscription, okay, which is in Raichur, Karnataka. Now this lies on the bank of Maski river, which is tributary of Tungabhadra, and it is a minor rock edict of Ashoka. It is not a major rock edict of Ashoka, it is a minor rock edict of Ashoka. Now why this is important? Maski inscription क्यों important है? Fine, कर्नाटका में है, Maski river पे है, doesn't matter. It is important because this is the first edict of Ashoka that contained his name Ashoka instead of Devanam Priya or Piyadasi. Okay, that we have seen earlier, that majorly in all his inscription he is said as Devanam Priya Piyadasi. But this in this minor rock edict called Maski inscription, this is the first such edict which contains the name Ashoka. Okay, and next one is the Kalinga edicts. So the Kalinga edicts contains 11 out of 14 rock edicts of Ashoka, and the language is Magadhi Prakrit and script is Brahmi. Okay, the 14 rock edicts है Ashoka के, out of these 14 rock edicts, 11 are contained in the Kalinga edicts. Okay, सबसे ज्यादा एडिक्ट्स कहाँ पे आते हैं? आपके कलिंगा एडिक्ट्स में आते हैं. It is in Magadhi Prakrit and the script is Brahmi. Next important ancient inscription is your Aihole inscription. Very important. Okay, it is located in Aihole, which is in Karnataka, and it is in Meguti temple. The inscription is in Meguti temple. This inscription is written by Ravi Kirti, who is the court poet of Pulakeshin II. ये Chalukya king था. Okay, Pulakeshin II was a very great Chalukyan king. Now, what was the language of this language and script of this inscription? The language was Sanskrit and script was Kannada. Now, what does this inscription means or indicated? So, it indicated defeat of Harshavardhan by Pulkesin II and victory of Chalukya over Pallava. So, two episodes have been mentioned in the Aihole inscription. First is that Pulkesin II, the Chalukyan king, has defeated Harshavardhan of the Vardhana dynasty. Okay, and second, that the Chalukyas has defeated the Pallavas. Okay, हर्षवर्धन से do you remember something? कुछ लिंक करने की कोशिश कर रहे हो आप? Fa Yan Xiongzhang. Okay, Fa Yan came at the time of Chandragupta II. Xiongzhang came at the time of King Harshavardhan. Okay, try to link such thing whenever you see it repeatedly. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट इज योर हाथी गुम्फा इंस्क्रिप्शन. नाउ ट्राई टू लिंक इट. हाथी गुम्फा इंस्क्रिप्शन हमने कहाँ पढ़ा था? नेक्स्ट लाइन में ही है, उदयगिर खंडागिरी केव्स इन उड़ीसा. ओके, so it is also known as elephant cave inscription from Udaygiri Khandagiri caves in Odisha. किसने इसको इंस्क्राइब किया था? We know it, हम इसे पढ़ चुके हैं, किंग खाराबेला ने. ओके, किंग खाराबेला is inscribed it in 2nd century BCE. एक और दूसरी केव कौन सी थी along with हाथी गुम्फा? It was रानी गुम्फा. ओके, सो हाथी गुम्फा इंस्क्रिप्शन में लैंग्वेज कौन सी यूज हुई थी? इट वाज प्राकृत लैंग्वेज एंड द स्क्रिप्ट वाज ब्राह्मी स्क्रिप्ट. ओके, so along with this extra dose of information, your art, architecture and sculpture about the Gupta age has come to an end. Okay, thank you so much.